The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, and as I read those words, immediate removal of all watercraft, I felt something inside me break. 23 years I'd been launching my boat from that same spot on Pine Lake. 23 years of dawn fishing trips, sunset rides with my late wife Sarah, teaching my grandkids to ski in those gentle waters. But Karen Mitchell, our newly elected HOA president, had other plans. What she didn't know was that her crusade to ban my boat would lead me to discover something so shocking about our lakefront property that it would turn her perfect little kingdom upside down. And by the time I was done, I wouldn't just have my boat back on the water, I'd own half the shoreline. Let me take you back to where this all started. My name is Robert Chen, and I've lived in Lakewood Estates for over 2 decades. It's one of those planned communities where every house looks just different enough to feel unique, but similar enough that your property values stay stable. The crown jewel of our neighborhood has always been Pine Lake, a pristine spring-fed lake that attracted most of us here in the first place. When Sarah and I moved here in 2001, the HOA was run by Bill Henderson, a retired teacher who understood that rules existed to help neighbors get along, not to control every aspect of our lives. We had simple guidelines: keep your lawn neat, don't play loud music after 10, and respect the shared spaces around the lake. It was paradise. I bought my boat, a modest 18-foot fishing boat, named Sarah's Dream, 3 years after we moved in. The HOA handbook mentioned that watercraft were welcome as long as they were properly registered and maintained. I followed every rule to the letter. I even built a small dock extension with proper permits, contributing to the community's overall appeal. Those were golden years. Sarah and I would take evening cruises, watching herons fish in the shallows and listening to the loons call across the water. When our daughter Lisa moved to California, we'd video call her from the boat, showing her the sunset over the lake she grew up loving. When Sarah got sick, those gentle boat rides became our escape from hospital rooms and treatment schedules. After Sarah passed 3 years ago, that boat became more than recreation. It became my connection to her memory, my sanctuary, my reason to get up in the morning. Then Karen Mitchell moved to Lakewood Estates. Karen arrived last spring with her lawyer husband David and their teenage son. They bought the Morrison Place, the biggest house in the development, right on the lake with a sprawling lawn that stretched down to the water's edge. Within 2 months, Karen was attending every HOA meeting with a legal pad full of concerns and suggestions for improvement. By November, she had somehow maneuvered herself into the HOA presidency after Bill Henderson decided he'd had enough of her constant challenges to every decision he made. Karen's first official act as president was to call an emergency meeting about waterfront safety and aesthetic concerns. I should have seen it coming. But nothing could have prepared me for what that certified letter would set in motion. The meeting was held on a cold February evening in the community center. Karen sat at the head table wearing a navy blazer and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. About 30 homeowners showed up more than usual, which told me Karen had been making phone calls. "Thank you all for coming," she began, consulting her notes like she was presenting to a corporate board. "As your HOA president, I've identified several issues that require immediate attention for the safety and property values of our community." She clicked to her first PowerPoint slide. A photo of my boat filled the screen. "Unauthorized watercraft present both safety hazards and aesthetic concerns," she continued. "Insurance liability, environmental impact, and the negative effect on property values must be considered." My neighbor Janet whispered, "But Bob's had that boat forever." "What's the problem?" Karen's eyes found mine across the room. "The problem, Mrs. Hoffman, is that when the original HOA covenants were written, certain oversights occurred. After consulting with legal counsel, we've determined that the current boat policy violates county environmental regulations and our insurance coverage. I stood up slowly. Karen, I followed every rule in the handbook. My boat is properly registered, maintained, and I've never had a single complaint in 20 years. 23 years, actually, she corrected with that cold smile. Which is part of the problem. Grandfathering in violations doesn't make them legal. The room buzzed with confused murmurs. Violations. I felt my face getting hot, but I kept my voice level. What violations are you talking about? She clicked to another slide, showing a blown-up section of text. Section 12C of our County Environmental Code clearly states that private watercraft storage on community property requires specific permits that were never obtained. Additionally, our HOA insurance policy specifically excludes liability coverage for privately owned watercraft. I felt the room's energy shift. People were looking at me differently now, like I was some kind of rule breaker who'd been putting them all at risk. Karen had done her homework. The solution is simple, she continued. All privately owned watercraft must be removed from HOA property within 30 days. No exceptions. The meeting erupted. Tom Bradley, who owned a small kayak, stood up arguing. Mrs. Chen from Oak Street pointed out that her grandchildren's paddle boat was also technically a watercraft. But Karen had an answer for everything, backed up by legal documents and insurance policy language. As the meeting wound down, I approached Karen directly. "This seems targeted," I said quietly. "If this is really about rules and safety, why not work with boat owners to come into compliance instead of banning everything?" She gathered her papers methodically. "Mr. Chen, I'm sure this feels personal, but I assure you it's not. I'm simply enforcing the rules that should have been enforced years ago. Your boat is the largest and most visible violation, but it's certainly not the only one." She paused at the door and turned back. "You have 30 days. I'd suggest you start looking for alternative storage." That night, I sat in my kitchen, staring at Sarah's photo on the windowsill. The boat slip at the public marina was $300 a month, money I could afford, but it would mean a 20-minute drive each way just to get to the water. It would mean losing those spontaneous evening cruises, those quiet morning coffee runs on the lake. But more than that, it felt like Karen was taking away the last piece of my life with Sarah. I decided to fight back. What I discovered would change everything. I spent the next week buried in documents. County records, original HOA filings, insurance policies, environmental regulations, anything that might give me ammunition against Karen's claims. My daughter Lisa, bless her heart, even flew in from California to help me organize everything. "Dad, are you sure this is worth it?" she asked on Thursday evening as we sat surrounded by stacks of papers. "I mean, maybe it's time to downsize anyway. You don't really need a boat." I looked at her for a long moment. "Lisa, when your mother was dying, we spent our last good day together on that boat. She made me promise to keep taking her out on the water, to keep sharing the lake with her. That boat isn't just a boat to me." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my hand. "Then we'll find a way to keep it." The breakthrough came on Friday morning. I was reviewing the original property deeds from 2000, trying to understand exactly what land the HOA actually controlled, when I noticed something odd. The legal description of the shoreline property didn't match what I remembered from my own deed. I pulled out my homeowner's insurance policy and compared the property boundaries. Then I cross-referenced with the county assessor's maps online. That's when I saw it. The section of shoreline where I'd been launching my boat for 23 years, the section Karen claimed was HOA common property, was actually listed on my deed. According to the county records, I owned a 50-foot strip of lakefront that extended from my backyard all the way to the water's edge. My hands were shaking as I traced the property line on the assessor's map. Somehow, in all these years, I'd never realized that I owned actual waterfront property. The original developers had apparently deeded lake access to several homeowners along the shore, but over time, the HOA had simply assumed control of the maintenance and treated it as common area. But ownership and maintenance are two very different things. I called the county assessor's office that afternoon. The clerk, Mrs. Rodriguez, was incredibly helpful. "Oh yes, Mr. Chen. You definitely own that strip. It's been on your tax assessment this whole time you've been paying taxes on waterfront property for over 20 years. The HOA has no legal claim to that land." I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. "What about the other properties along the shore?" There was the sound of typing. "Let me see. Looks like there are 7 properties total with deeded lake access. Most of them probably don't realize it because the HOA has been maintaining the area, but legally, they own those strips of shoreline." That evening, I called my lawyer. Jim Patterson had handled Sarah's estate, and he knew our family well. When I explained the situation, there was a long pause. "Bob, this is actually a significant property issue. If what you're telling me is correct, Karen's HOA doesn't have the authority to ban your boat from your own property. But more than that, if you own waterfront property, there could be some interesting legal implications here." "What kind of implications?" "Well, waterfront property rights can be complex. Depending on how the original deeds were written, you might have rights that extend beyond just the land. You might have navigation rights, water access rights, even some control over adjacent water usage." My heart was pounding. "Jim, I need you to research this thoroughly. I want to know exactly what I own and what rights come with it. I'll get started first thing Monday." "Bob, this could be bigger than just keeping your boat." As I hung up the phone, I looked out my kitchen window toward the lake. Karen's house was visible across the water, its oversized deck lights reflecting on the surface. What Karen didn't know yet was that her war against my boat was about to become something much bigger. Something that would turn her perfectly controlled community upside down. Jim's research took 2 weeks, and what he discovered was beyond anything I had imagined. Not only did I own that 50-foot strip of lakefront, but the original deed included something called riparian rights, legal rights that came with waterfront property ownership, including the right to access the water, the right to use the water for recreation, and most importantly, the right to build structures like docks and boat launches on my own property. But the real bombshell was what Jim discovered about the other lakefront properties. "Bob, sit down for this," he said when he called me on Monday morning. "I've researched all 7 properties with lake access. 5 of the homeowners, including you, have clear riparian rights. But here's the kicker: one of those properties is Karen's." I felt my mouth go dry. Karen owns waterfront property too? Not just any waterfront property. The Morrison Place Karen's house has the largest deeded lake access of any property in the development. 150 feet of shoreline with full riparian rights, including commercial usage rights. Commercial usage rights? What does that mean? Jim's voice was grim. "It means Karen has the legal right to operate a commercial business from her shoreline. She could rent boat slips, run a marina, charge for lake access, basically anything water-related. And Bob, there's more. I checked with the county, and 3 weeks ago, Karen filed an application for a commercial marina permit." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Karen wasn't trying to protect the community from boats, she was trying to eliminate competition. She wanted exclusive commercial control of the lake. "Jim, what are our options?" "Well, the nuclear option would be to assert your riparian rights fully. You could build a private dock, charge other homeowners for lake access, basically do everything Karen's planning to do. But there's an easier way. I'm listening. We call her bluff. Publicly, the next HOA meeting is Thursday night. We present the evidence, expose her real agenda, and watch her story fall apart. That Thursday, I arrived at the community center with Jim and a folder full of documents. The meeting was packed. Word had gotten around that there might be drama, and nobody wanted to miss it. Karen sat at the head table looking supremely confident, probably expecting me to either beg for an extension or announce I was moving my boat. "Before we begin tonight's agenda," I said, standing up as soon as Karen called the meeting to order, "I'd like to address the watercraft issue from last month." Karen's smile faltered slightly. "Mr. Chen, if you have comments, there will be time during the public comment period." "Actually, Karen, this can't wait, because what I'm about to share affects every property owner in this room." I nodded to Jim, who stood up beside me. "My name is Jim Patterson, and I represent Mr. Chen. 3 weeks ago, this HOA demanded that he remove his boat from what the board claimed was community property. We've since discovered that claim was false." The room went completely silent. Karen's face had gone pale. Jim continued, "Mr. Chen owns a 50-foot strip of lakefront property with full riparian rights. He has every legal right to dock his boat on his own land. But more importantly, we've discovered that 5 other homeowners in this room also own waterfront property with similar rights." He began reading names. "The Johnson property, the Martinez property, the Wilson property, the Bradley property, and," he paused for dramatic effect, "the Morrison property." All eyes turned to Karen, who was gripping her gavel so tightly her knuckles were white. "Mrs. Mitchell," Jim said, his voice carrying across the silent room, "would you like to explain to your neighbors why you filed for a commercial marina permit 3 weeks ago while simultaneously trying to ban their boats from the lake?" The room erupted. Tom Bradley jumped to his feet. "You what? You are going to charge us to use our own lake?" Karen stood up shakily. This is completely out of order. These accusations are—" "Public record," Jim interrupted, pulling out a document. "Filed with the County Planning Department on February 8th. The application for commercial marina permit, Morrison property, applicant Karen Mitchell." Mrs. Johnson shouted from the back, "You were going to steal our lake access and then rent it back to us?" Karen's husband David was pulling on her sleeve, whispering urgently in her ear. She shook him off and tried to regain control. "Everyone needs to calm down. Yes, I explored commercial options, but only to provide better amenities for the community." "By banning everyone else's boats first?" I said, my voice carrying over the chaos. "Karen, you tried to steal my boat, my memories of my wife, my connection to this lake. Also, you could turn it into your personal business venture." The room was getting louder, angrier. Someone called for a vote of no confidence. Someone else demanded Karen's resignation. But Karen wasn't done fighting. She slammed her gavel repeatedly until the room quieted. "Fine. You want to play legal games? Let's play. Mr. Chen, your so-called riparian rights come with responsibilities. Environmental impact studies, insurance requirements, safety inspections. I hope you're prepared for the county to scrutinize every aspect of your waterfront usage." She smiled that cold smile one more time. "Be careful what you wish for." That's when I realized Karen still didn't understand what she'd unleashed. She thought this was still about one old man and his boat. She had no idea what was coming next. Karen's threat to bring county scrutiny into my waterfront usage was the biggest mistake she could have made. Because when the county environmental inspector came out the following week, he didn't just look at my small dock and boat launch. He looked at everything, including the massive deck extension Karen had built over the water without permits, the private beach area she'd created by dumping sand and removing natural vegetation, and the decorative pond she'd dug that was illegally diverting water from the lake. The inspector's report was damning. Karen's unpermitted modifications had violated at least 6 environmental regulations and created genuine safety hazards for the entire lake ecosystem. The county issued a stop work order and fined her $15,000. But the real poetic justice came when I decided to fully exercise my riparian rights. Instead of just keeping my boat, I partnered with the other 4 waterfront property owners to create something Karen never saw coming: a genuine community marina. We pooled our resources and our legal water access rights to build a beautiful, permitted dock system that provided boat slips for any community member who wanted one. And here's the beautiful part: because we owned the land and had riparian rights, the HOA couldn't stop us. We charged just enough to cover maintenance costs, making lake access affordable for everyone in Lakewood Estates. Karen's commercial marina permit was rejected by the county due to the environmental violations on her property. By the time she fixed all the issues and paid the fines, she'd lost her taste for waterfront business ventures. The final blow came at the next HOA election. Karen was voted out in a landslide, replaced by Tom Bradley, who ran on a platform of reasonable rules and community cooperation. His first act as president was to officially recognize the community marina as a neighborhood amenity. 6 months later, I still take my evening cruises on Sarah's Dream. But now I'm usually joined by a small flotilla of neighbors who've discovered the joy of being on the water. Mrs. Johnson learned to fish from her grandson's kayak. The Martinez family bought a pontoon boat perfect for their 3 kids. Even Jim Patterson, my lawyer, bought a small sailboat and docks it at our community marina. Karen and David still live across the lake, but they keep to themselves now. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they're looking to sell and move closer to David's law practice downtown. I hope they find happiness somewhere else, somewhere they can appreciate what they have instead of scheming to take what belongs to others. Sometimes in the early morning, when the mist is rising off Pine Lake and the loons are calling, I like to think Sarah would be proud of how this all turned out. She always said that the best way to deal with bullies was to stand up for what's right, not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't stand up for themselves. My boat is still named Sarah's Dream, and that dream is still alive on Pine Lake. But now it's a dream I get to share with my whole community. Would you have fought back the way I did? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of HOA drama and neighborly justice, make sure to subscribe for more tales of Karens getting their comeuppance and communities coming together. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in the world of homeowner association chaos. G-Frame.